Welcome to the discussion. For this week's topic, we will be looking at espionage and spy work in RP and how to go about it properly. So, topics we'll be doing is what is spying and espionage and what does it entail, the effects of these on RP and nations, how do you actually RP it properly, how do you try to prevent it, how does it work with extreme empire types. We're going to be touching on cyber warfare and also situations where you would use these and appropriate political responses. So the first thing is, what is spying and espionage and what does it entail? Pretty simple. Intelligence gathering on the enemy nation, or on any nation. Doesn't even have to be an enemy. Pretty much it is being able to get any sort of information that you need from one of these other polities. Also being able to infiltrate and possibly undermine their systems, whether that be their government or their military or any of the above. And not in a necessarily aggressive way either. It could be that your ally that you have is making some decisions that you don't particularly agree with, so you try to, let's just say, nudge them a bit more towards a certain belief point. Or it could be that you are in a war and you do want to undermine your opponent and sabotage a load of their industrial works, etc. There is really no definitive list for what you can do with spying and espionage, because it's just such a broad thing, and it really does depend on what you want to accomplish in RP and what the context is for what you're using it. It can be, as I said, as something simple as you finding out a piece of information, and it could be as crazy as you inserting some sort of backroom door to an entire opposing nation's fleet in their hardware and allowing you to just completely and utterly take over their ships in the middle of combat. So there's really sort of all sorts that you can do. Jade, you're hot micing a bit.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's sort of the basics. You don't need it to be against an enemy, and you don't necessarily need it to be offensive in nature to do any sort of damage to the opposition. So the sort of creme de la creme of this is, how do you RP it properly? So there's going to be some sort of prime rules here for whenever you're doing any sort of espionage and spy stuff, because inherently you have to work with the other person in order to do any sort of things in this way. So the number one rule is you have to work with the person that you're spying on or conducting espionage on. You have to be open with them in what you're trying to accomplish. Basically state, okay, my nation is going to attempt to do this. It is going to attempt to steal some information from this source, or it's going to attempt to plant a bomb in one of your minister's apartments, or it is going to try to set up some sleeper cells in your nation to help a particular political ideology later down the line. You have to work with the opposition, because then they can go, okay, let's RP that out. And you can at least go over, what kind of things that they might encounter, what difficulties, how it will work within their nation. And pretty much the last thing that you want to do is announce to someone that you've infiltrated their nation overnight, and you now have the ability to assassinate a load of their people, or you're inside all of their computer systems, or you have just nuked their capital, or any number of the above. Any situation where you are doing spying and espionage, where your opponent has no way in any way, shape or form to counterplay or interact with that move, means that it's instantly god modding in some capacity. and metagaming, depending on how they're doing it. So the absolute rule is make sure that you work with the opposing player, and the second rule is if it even slightly hints towards god modding or metagaming or power playing, it should immediately not be pursued, because the moment that happens, it's going to be bad RP. Cyber warfare, espionage, spying, etc. It's a two-way street. You're both there to have fun. So if I want to, say, infiltrate Often's nation and try and assassinate one of his interior ministers, I'm going to say to Often, I want to do this RP, and he's going to be like, okay, well, it has to be done in sort of this particular way because of the nature of how my nation's set up, and then we can create an RP chat. Now, it doesn't have to be a back and forth, so-and-so walks into the courtyard and does this, and then, the guards sort of notice something. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be along the lines of, the agent, goes into this place, and then the response can be something along the lines of, he gets contacted by this insider or whatever, and you can kind of do it like a report style, or just go over a storyline which doesn't have to be from a sort of like traditional perspective. It makes it way easier. Sort of like if you were writing a journal yourself, but with the other person having input and helping guide you into the story, so that, you're not literally pulling stuff out your ass, left, right and centre. So, it definitely has to be done in RP, or in a way that, if you write up a journal doing something, the other player has some form of feedback. Another key thing of how you RP it properly. So, a big thing with spying and espionage, even modern day, people like to think that it is James Bond going into another nation with his disguises and his sexy flair and doing all of this stuff and, getting the girl, blowing up whatever, assassinating whatever, and getting out to live another day. That is not how that is done, even in modern day. It is extremely rare that agents will be sent into another country to openly do jobs. How spying and espionage is usually done is very, very simple. You let them do it for you. For example, China wanted to get its hands on the United States details for the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning, yeah? Now, they could send some super-duper, Chinese equivalent to James Bond into one of the big, Boeing or Lockheed Martin, whatever, to get in there, hack the servers, steal everything and get out. What they actually did was they just paid off key members of the project teams and people who ran the company and senators and the like to just send them the money. Or not send them the money, send them the details, send them all the plans. So some guy just walks in with a USB stick, copies it, drops it off to another person, and he takes it all the other side of the world to China. Bish bash bosh, you've now got access to all of the other stuff. And it's this kind of point where most of the things that you're going to be doing to try and undermine another nation, get information, try to conduct things, is by using their own people. A good example, again, would be, you want to assassinate a particular... let's go back to the Forellian thing. So the Union wants to assassinate a particular Forellian minister. So, they get in contact through backroom channels and such with a bunch of young people who, on the Anknet, believe that they want to make a difference. And they believe that their nation isn't as good as it could be. And they're going to be quite adamant that they want to change it for the better. And so the union's going to be like, what if we give you the means to do that? What if we can give you the equipment and the information that you need to make your nation a better place? And they're going to be like, yeah, no problem. And they're going to sort of like slowly radicalize these individuals until in the end they say, okay, we've managed to, through other contacts that we've got in your nation, put these particular packages at these key intervals. In it is weapons. You're going to kill it. You're going to try and take down this particular individual because he's done this, that, and the other, and that's bad for your people. And they're going to be like, "Yep, let's do this. We're freedom fighters. We can kill this person, and we can set an example to the rest of our people to say, hey, it doesn't have to be tyranny forever or whatever." That happens, and then boom, the Union doesn't have any body in nation to, get caught or whatever. It's all their own people. So you want to use in any sort of spying or espionage the opposing people's own population and key individuals more than anything else, especially if it's in an alien nation. If you're sending your species that's quite obvious to another nation, which is not your species, kind of going to stick out like a sore thumb. So again, it's all well and good to send agents into enemy territory, but at the end of the day, the big heavy lifting is going to be done by their own population and key individuals within such. Whether that is just paying people off to send you information, or paying people off to do particular things, or radicalising key members of their population, or any of the above, you want to try and do as much destabilisation as possible without any ties back to you, which they can go, oh hey, we're clearly being screwed around with by these particular agents from this particular faction. Now, you can send agents in to their nation. The best ways to do that is by, tourism, just sending people in to masquerade, or business links. Again, another fantastic way to get some good old corruption going behind the scenes. But, yeah, that's sort of like the big thing is that, you don't send your own people in for everything. It's predominantly using the other person. And also, it's predominantly online. So, we'll sort of touch on cyber warfare a bit later because that's also a sort of big topic. But, again, most of the stuff is just finding backdoors in people's systems, getting in, getting what you need, and getting out. And leaving as little behind as possible. Especially at the moment in the modern day, cyber warfare is pretty crippling, where companies get hacked and all their secrets get leaked. And it will probably be the same in Ansarios, big rhizomes trying to be harnessed by particular hackers of nations, then break into other nations. I mean, nations like the United States is always trying to hack into other countries. China is well renowned for trying to hack into other countries' infrastructure and everything. It will be the same sort of thing. So the whole premise of James Bond going in and doing whatever, not really relevant, to be honest. Not really going to be a thing. Don't expect that to happen. If you do want to do that, feel free to do it with, your RP partner if you want some super special spy shit where, James Bond is going in and doing everything. Feel free. But otherwise, it's probably just going to be, some anonymous contact radicalising some teenagers on the other side of the galaxy to go and do whatever the hell they want to get done. But the whole thing is you want to be, especially in wartime, you can use espionage and the like to destabilise the enemy. Often by very simple means, espionage of just paying off other factions. Oh, you want to go and cripple a particular area? Yeah, that's fine. Just go pay off some privateers or some pirates. Oh, you want to keep it so that the enemy have to focus most of their military on their own particular region of space rather than being able to just go out and attack you, well, that's fine. Just pay off all of their political extremists. Just help arm them, help fund them, let them go and blow up their own stuff, and make it so that their military has to spend all of their time quashing rebellions and uprising and political extremists rather than fighting your own people. Of course, there's also the whole thing of having spy networks across the galaxy. If you are going to try and do something like that and build your nation up as a sort of a big spy behind the scenes faction, best way to do that is just to write up and RP that as much as you possibly can. Try to do espionage things with other players, write things up with happening with the unaligned, etc. That's left to your hot miking a bit. Just anything to help establish. That's sort of like a general point in Anserios, but if you're wanting to show that you have a focus on something, you want to try and establish it as much as you possibly can. But yeah, I think that's that sort of covered, I guess. Does anyone have any sort of questions on that, on how to RP it properly, or? As for sort of cosmetics to disguise species and such, it honestly depends, and the problem is a lot of nations also have stuff like genetic locks, ID chips, all that sort of thing. So, again, like, if you want to RP a James Bond style spy thing with another player and they're alright with it, go for it. Other than that, it's going to be very hard to pull that off. Unless, obviously, you're a human nation, the opponent's a human nation, and you're basically the same. Then, okay, possibly. There's a possible chance there. But has anyone got any other sort of stuff about that, or? Okay. So, the next thing is how do you try and prevent it? Again, it's kind of a broad thing, and it does really depend on, who's trying to infiltrate you or conduct espionage, what exactly they're trying to go for, how they're trying to do it, and the sort of context behind what's actually going on in terms of what it all links to. The general thing is, if you are a open social democratic nation where you've got tourists coming and going, you've got good ties with lots of other nations, you've got lots of outside investment coming into your nation, foreign investors, that sort of thing, it's going to be quite hard, realistically, to defend against espionage encroachment. Purely for the sheer fact that, people can come into your nation to do all sorts of things, you allow all sorts of beliefs and ideologies, and people can then sort of come in and put all kinds of poison into your population's minds, or, they can try to manipulate behind the scenes economically, which we talked about last week, to sort of have some say within your economy by, poking you with saying, you've got to try and do this, or we're going to, withdraw funding. That's a form of espionage. And if your companies are quite open and sell very much to a whole wide market, again, it's going to be quite easy for others to, pay off individuals in the company and basically be like, yeah, if we'll pay you huge amounts of money if you give us the technical specifications for this particular thing. The more of a dick you are, the easier to defend. Not necessarily. However, it does mean that ultra-authoritarian nations are somewhat harder to conduct espionage on, but only in certain ways. So while you won't be able to easily send, say, agents into enemy territory or get things on the inside, it would be very, very easy for an authoritarian nation to basically contact individuals within that state and say, we're willing to pay you big time if you do this particular thing for us. That was a very big thing in the USSR during the Cold War, and has been in authoritarian nations since, because they typically don't get paid huge amounts of money, and the state is obviously pretty oppressive. So if you want to get on inside, just bribe key officials or offer them things that they personally want, or blackmail them, it doesn't matter, and you'll have a good way in. And if that's at the top, then you're even better. We'll get on to religiously fanatic nations in the sort of the bit where we look at the extremes. But yeah, so how to counter is effectively have good security, have good surveillance, have good cybersecurity, and generally, just sort of work with the opposition. If somebody comes to you in an RP and says, "Hey, I want to conduct some espionage in your nation," and you do a role play, there's nothing wrong with agreeing between the two of you. Like at the very start, okay, let's just say that you win and you get the data. And then they go, okay, no problem, and you just RP that, and you know that they're going to get through in the end. And then next time they might be like, okay, let's do this, and you say, okay, well, maybe I actually stop them this time. Maybe we intercept the sort of transmissions, and we arrest the person that you've been using as a contact mid go, and then it makes it a little bit more interesting, because now the infiltrators have to try and find another contact or whatever, and give it so that there's give and take. Again, have it so that there's interaction on both sides. It's kind of a boring spy story if you contact somebody in a nation and just go, hey, give me all of this stuff and I'll pay you lots of money, and they go, okay. Like, there's no real story there. However, it'd be more easy if, these people go into this other nation, contact this source and go, hey, have you got the plans that we were going to be using, and then we've got the money, and they go, yeah, no problem, but then it turns out that source is actually a plant, and the actual source that they've had has been captured, and so they have to try and break out of like maybe a small firefight with government agents, and then locate the actual original source while being tracked by whatever, or anything to do with that, where you've sort of got some back and forth tug where suddenly the people who are trying to stop the infiltrators or espionage are on the back foot, and then the next minute the people who are doing the espionage might be on the back foot because shock horror, the person that you were actually using as a covert mole inside of their government is a double agent or something along those lines. It definitely shouldn't be one-sided. You want to have back and forth. Again, there's nothing wrong with agreeing on the outcome. There's, nothing wrong with working with other people. Highly encouraged. It's just like any other form of RP. There's going to be some back and forth. There's going to be somebody probably winning out at the end, but that's fine. Build a rapport with the other person. It could be even better if you have some funky espionage and counter-espionage going on between two nations, even when they're not at war. This is another thing, is that, these sorts of things are done by all nations. And they're done just in general, in peacetime. So it's kind of interesting if you want to have a sort of, not a war so to say, but a sort of espionage war between two factions that might be on shaky ground, and then that sort of stuff escalates. Yeah, just have a big silent war. There was some of that going on in the first Dan Serios War to some extent, and it was actually really fun having characters behind the scenes pulling strings and trying to do things with the different nations. And I fully imagine that there's going to be a shit ton of espionage and silent war stuff in the upcoming Unaligned arc, especially with some of the Unaligned being quite renowned for, you know, trying to pull strings in other nations, and same with some of the colonials. So there's definitely going to be a lot of back and forth there. But as said, at the end of the day, you're writing a fun RP for both sides. And if that means that, you know, there's going to be some stonewalling, as in, I immediately infiltrate your nation, ha ha ha, or the complete opposite, which is on the topic that we're on, my nation can't be gotten into, or like can't be spied on, or there's no way that your people could ever infiltrate or conduct espionage or spy in my nation. That's an actual pretty big common one in RP. You can't do that in my nation because they're all super authoritarian and they all super love their nation, and everyone can just immediately identify if some rando dude is, you know, out of place, etc. That's just not really how it works. You know, there's always going to be people within a nation who are like, we think differently, and we're willing to take action to change that. There's always going to be ideological radicals. There's always going to be people in positions of power who want more power. There's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be, you know, weak links in the chain of information sending. And there's always going to be stuff present to try and combat each of those factors inside a nation. So, does anyone sort of have any questions on the, like, you know, how to try and prevent it? You know, having some internal security forces is another sort of good, you know, like a counterintelligence, counter-espionage wing of your military or government. That's always a good thing to have. Pretty fun to dive into, and makes any sort of espionage RP quite a bit more interesting, especially if they're like secret police in an authoritarian nation, etc. But yeah, it's all the like super mundane stuff, you know, countermeasures, security checks, surveillance, vetting, the usual malarkey. Yeah, having double agents and doing like a spy agency versus spy agency is definitely the grounds for a good RP. Fantastic rounds, in fact.
And there can be like two spy agencies working together.
Yep.
And if you want to spy against an unaligned faction, because they are NPCs, not playable.
Yeah, in that situation, you would work with the admins. So running a confederate of countries, each trying to one-up each other, yes. So there you would actually have a pretty like easy way in to just infiltrate that particular faction. Same with Natal, like, or you know, any of that sort of thing. Like any faction that's inherently fragmented, you know, you can easily go to one of these like key people and be like, yo, I can help you get a one-up on this particular faction or individual. You just need to do a favour for me. Boom, done. You know, like it literally is just as easy as that. You can get stuff like blackmail where they actually dig up all of this like terrible stuff that a character's done in the past, and then just say like, well, we'll publicly reveal that and completely and utterly destroy any chance for your political party to ever get elected again, and you have to stand down unless you do exactly what we tell you to do. So there is literally infinite ways to screw with people and to defend against being screwed. So the next topic is, how does it work with extreme empire types? So this is where it gets sort of interesting. The first one that was brought up was hive minds, I think. Well, we'll start with hive minds anyway. So with hive minds, it's obviously going to be impossible to send in an agent of any way, shape, or form. It's also going to be impossible to try and extort a particular individual or get some sort of tap within, the nation for like an individual. Depending on what kind of hive mind it is, but generally speaking, we're just going to go for the broad term of like the hive mind. It's all one mind. Depending, however, on what kind of hive mind it is and how they communicate, you can try and tap a drone to the hive mind itself. So if it's an AI hive mind, you could potentially isolate one of its sort of extremities and tap it and use it for information relay. You can then try and break whatever encryption or method that this AI uses to communicate across its whole hive mind, and then try and siphon any sort of interesting information that you get along, or use that to try and conduct cyber warfare against it. The same with any biological hive mind. Even if they're psionic, there's still ways to, biohack particular entities and know what they're thinking and what they're trying to do. And pretty much it's just any way that you can get information out, you can use to conduct sort of spying on, a hive mind. For espionage, it can just be a case of hiring privateers or hiring other factions to conduct problems for this hive mind. It could even be, and ironically this might actually work, if there is a hive mind that has done, all of this bad stuff in the past, like maybe it's conducted genocide against a pre-FTL species or something while it's expanding. If you can find out proof of that, you could then turn to the whole hive mind and just say, we know, do what we want, or we tell the whole galaxy. There's all sorts of ways to try and blackmail any of these things. So hive minds, it's not impossible. Religious fanatic empires. So again, it depends, but just because somebody's a religious fanatic does not mean that they're not necessarily going to be open to the idea of change. There are still those within, look at the Crusades, look at ISIL. They had all sorts of people on the inside, and they were religious extremists. You had them taking funding from all sorts of different nations and political backgrounds and ideologies, and they were all saying, we'll arm you and we'll give you all of this money as long as you do this particular thing for us. Like persecute this particular ethnic minority, or go and take over and destroy all of these oil wells with all of from this particular country or area. There's ways that you can do that for religious fanatics. You could basically say to them, I'll help sort of spread your religion in this particular way if you do this for us or whatever. EOS isn't exactly EOS is a pretty big religious fanatic faction. They're not immune to espionage. You could go in and find some individuals in there who would not exactly be, let's just say, happy with the state of how things run in the consortium. Minorities and such that have been taken into the EOS faith. And you could probably get them to commit acts to disrupt EOS as a whole, or you can blackmail them or whatever. It's all possible. What other extremes are there? Again, I've gone over authoritarians, like massive authoritarians. The state's going to be repressive. People always want money. There's always going to be corruption in authoritarians. It's going to be quite easy to just get a foothold. All it needs is for you to be able to sway one particular person. Now, that they might say, this particular character would never turn against his nation. Maybe so, but there's always going to be some. You can never say that your nation is one homogeneous mass. Ever. That's just not how it works. Again, even with stuff like devouring swarms, you could conduct espionage where you bait them. You send out ships that are quite simple, and you hit this particular, like devouring entity again and again and again in a particular place, and drive them towards a particular unaligned or a particular player nation, and suddenly they have to deal with it. And now there's two threats that are now dealing with each other. Or you can systematically destroy things that they need on worlds that they're invading. Send in agents or try to get people to blow up their own sort of facilities to stop it from advancing. Or pay privateers to go and repeatedly destroy its crucial infrastructure. So, espionage and spying doesn't exactly mean that you need to get into that nation to do anything. You can still do things from the outside, which you don't even have to interact with either. That's the beauty of this sort of like behind the scenes silent war stuff. It can all be done from the comfiness of your own chair, in some government office. Does anyone have any sort of questions regarding that sort of thing? Any sort of extreme examples that they want some answers to or whatever? Okay, I guess not. Nice. So, the next bit is touching on cyber warfare. So, I'm not going to cover the more tactical use in ship-to-ship combat or ground combat that people might think I'm going to do. I'm going to go over the sort of strategic and sort of grand scale stuff. So cyber warfare happens practically 24/7, even in modern day. Nations are always trying to find. Johora, you're hot micing again.
No, sir.
You might want to go push to talk.
Okay.
Thank you. So, pretty much, it's a case of they're always trying to find backdoors into other nations. Always testing cyber defences. You've probably got teams in different nations, entire departments they come in 9 to 5 and do whatever shifts, and they just try to get into other nations' systems. Now, this doesn't need to be, let's get the nuclear launch codes. It doesn't even have to be that. A good example is, in real life at the moment, over the past sort of decade or so, a lot of cyber warfare attacks have been focused on civilian infrastructure, such as power grids, internet service providers, and banking systems. Now, everyone thinks okay, but surely they go after the military. How are you going to fight a war when all of a sudden your civilian power grid goes down? How are you going to fight a war when suddenly all of your people who go to the ATMs to try and, take out money or do any sort of day-to-day buying or shopping, how are they going to use any of their money and have all of the money in circulation when your banking system goes down? How are you going to communicate with anything, or how are your people going to do anything, especially with businesses, when the internet doesn't work? So, in many ways, you can cripple another nation without even firing a shot. And without even sending in any soldiers. So, the whole big thing with cyber warfare on a strategic scale is to try and find a back door to try and get some sort of massive advantage over the opposition. And that is on the strategic scale that does not involve firing or warfare or ships or whatever. It involves trying to one-up your opponent. So, you're going to have this whole thing where they're trying to get into all of this infrastructure. Now, another big thing about cyber warfare is you can use it to blackmail on a huge scale. What happens if, say, 2 million of a particular planet's inhabitants suddenly get targeted by this massive social media campaign? Look at what happens surrounding the US elections, or Brexit, or the UK elections, or all of these elections that are currently going on, in current day, in this day and age. You get huge amounts of bots that come in to say all of these opinions. You get specifically targeted data mining where they try to find out what you're into, what you like to watch, what sort of thing entices you, what are the conversations that you like to hold, what are your interests, what's your job, etc. And they can use all of this data to build a bot, an online bot AI, that can then send you a friend request online, and they can seem like a normal dude who's, from another nation near you, or another city rather, and he could be like, hey, how are you doing? And they could get to know you. And this bot would be the perfect friend that you've always wanted. Always wanted. And what that bot will try and do is be like, oh, have you ever thought about it like this? Have you ever thought about this particular thing? What do you think about this? Maybe you could do it like this. And they will try to convince you that maybe your outlook or your opinion is wrong. They'll convince you that maybe the political ideology that you support and the government that you support, maybe they're in the wrong. Maybe that, couple of things that they did online was not that great. Maybe you won't vote for them at the next election. And before you know it, you've just been radicalised and you've just been manipulated by this bot that's been created. And those 2 million people that have been targeted by this persona sort of campaign with cyber warfare are now going to vote for the opposite party. And now that opposing party just wins that local election, and that local election happens to tip the nation's major election, which now means that there is a new party, which means a change in policy, and maybe this party's policy is more in line with the nation that wanted to tip the scales in their particular favour. So that's actually been done in character in the Operation Northern Resolution, where the Rangval cartel used that sort of social media tactic to completely and utterly go after the citizens of the United Federation under Nuclear rule, to basically say, hey, the Nucleans are not these lovely people, you want your independence. And they did, and now they're independent. So that's another major thing that you can sort of influence these people. That's the sort of low to the ground way of doing it. You can do it a lot more brute force as well, by pretty much digging up all of the horrific shit about a person that you can find online. What porn do they like? Do they have horrific fetishes? Do they have things that people would be like, what the fuck, dude, and make them think less? Did they ever say racist things back in 2012 when they were, doing bits online? Just dig up all the dirt that you could possibly can on them, and then blackmail them, and then just be like, yo, I'm going to release all of this stuff to the internet and your social media page if you don't vote this particular way in this election, or, yo, unless you do this particular thing or pay us this particular money, we're going to release all of this stuff to the public, and your name is going to be discredited forever. You're going to lose your job, or you're going to lose your government position, and people are going to do it because they don't want to be thrown to the winds. So there's definitely ways with cyber warfare to go after nations using espionage without throwing battleship walls or millions of men at an opposing faction. And it's definitely something that needs to be explored more in RP. And thankfully has been over the last couple of years, but would definitely like to see more of. And this is going to be a major thing in the unaligned war as well. But those are the kind of big things that you want to look out for cyber warfare on a strategic scale. Taking down enemy infrastructure using backdoors and crippling them in times of need. Blackmailing or manipulating the population to be more inclined to change in a way that you want and is beneficial for yourself. And, just getting inroads into another faction. So, has anyone got any questions on that front?
Here in the real world, there are like the same level of technology, but in Anchurius there are different nations with different level of technologies. Like there is someone advanced, there is someone that just became FTL or something like that. How do they do the cyber warfare? Like an advanced civilization attacking just a beginning civilization.
Well, it's not going to be instant because you still don't know all of their systems. You have to slowly get information. You don't just suddenly start hacking somebody like HackerMan. You have to gain information on their systems. You need to learn the layout of what they do. You need to learn their coding language. You need to look at their systems. You need to look at their people and study their people. You would need to build it up from the ground up. How would you RP that? So in Operation Northres, it was written as a series of journals and news articles that was basically decided out of character. So it was sort of like, okay, I'm going to do this out of character, and then the other person would be like, okay, in that case, I'm going to try and respond to do this, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, which is going to try and counter you, and they're going to be like, okay, I don't really have anything to do there, or okay, well, I'm going to do this, and then that gets incorporated into like a journal, or it can be written up in an RP, or it could be written up in news entries. You could just agree with whoever. Again, it's got to be back and forth. There's no I've just hacked your Facebook and has just convinced every single person on your Facebook to go out and vote for the Nazi party or something. That's not how that works. So there's still got to be back and forth. But yeah, press releases are a good way to do it, or short journals, or doing it through RP. Any other sort of questions on that front, or? Okay. So, situations where you would use these in the appropriate political responses. So, I've already basically said that, espionage and spying and cyber warfare can be used at all times, even in peacetime. It's always worth getting one-ups on nations around you, even allies, and it is always worth trying to find out whatever information you can. Now, obviously, you're not going to be conducting massive espionage against your allies in peacetime, but if you are, say, on a heightened tense alert level with another nation, it is worth maybe conducting some espionage or some spying on them and testing their cyber warfare and their systems. If there's a sort of build-up to war, it is a good idea to use this as a platform for more RP, to try and lead up to that conflict, where you have spy agencies fighting spy agencies, cyber warfare departments fighting cyber warfare departments, etc., etc. Lots of big sort of spiel campaigns for propaganda on both sides, trying to spam each other with as many bots trying to say retarded Facebook comments as they possibly can, Anything like that makes sense in a build-up for a conflict, or any cold conflict. It also makes sense if you don't want to send in any military forces. You can just set up some espionage or behind-the-scenes stuff with privateers, or, as I said, insurgents or political radicals. Anything to make them focus on other things and waste their resources and destabilise their nation. Appropriate political responses to these things. I mean, you're not going to invade another nation over spying, or cyber warfare, or espionage. Okay, if you decide to switch off another nation's power supply across all of their empire somehow, and it causes the deaths of millions of people, fair enough. Maybe it would be fair to, firebomb a planet of theirs or something. But that's a bit of a stretch. You would want to then sort of turn around, you're screwing with my population and you're trying to bribe all these corrupt officials, therefore you can't really be trusted, we're going to levy sanctions against you, or we're going to, expel your diplomats or something along those lines. Something really petty, something on the diplomatic channels. You don't want to start throwing around warships or men's lives or super weapons over something as basic as trying to, bribe somebody to give you Lockheed Martin's latest plans for their, plane or whatever. That's not how that works. The best response, political response in those situations, is to do it back. Just like, IRL, when China's trying to steal all of this stuff, US is doing the same thing back to them. And it is just a never-ending cycle of people trying to steal each other's stuff, people trying to undermine each other, people trying to take, all sorts of chances with corrupt individuals or political ideology rogues or whatever, just to try and make the world go round and get one up over everyone else. So, don't, if somebody infiltrates your nation and steals some stuff or bribes a corrupt official to do something silly, don't resort to warfare. Warfare is the last thing you're going to want for a nation. You want to do diplomatic sanctions, doing espionage back, maybe politically denouncing them, expelling diplomats, all that usual jazz. Just nothing major, unless if they somehow infiltrate your nation and bomb your capital and kill all of these people or assassinate some top-ranking individual, then maybe you could authorize a military strike of some capacity, but it would have to be limited. An eye for an eye sort of thing. You don't just escalate horrifically, but we've already covered that in another topic. Does anyone have any sort of questions on that front? Or just questions overall, to be honest? We're sort of almost at the end here. I'm sure I've missed a load of stuff, but I'm kind of tired and I'm missing my two greatest supporters, so... If you have anything to ask or say, feel free. I see. But yeah, I'd say that espionage is a sort of major thing to do in RP, and sort of it's one of the things that players don't really know how to approach, because they expect that it should be behind the scenes and sort of secret from the person that they're trying to infiltrate, but at the same time you can't really do that without god modding or completely breaking the rules of RP. So yeah, I just wish that players would be more trusting with each other, so you can work with the other person and therefore just generally have a fun time RPing some spacemen infiltrating other spacemen. At the end of the day, you're all there to have fun and write funky things up and make a good story. And that involves working with people, whether you're supposed to be doing secret hacker man stuff or not. And it's always good, especially lately, with us expanding into more things other than, shooty, killy, like economics and espionage and the like. It's definitely a good focus. But you've just got to make sure that you don't pull anything out your ass. And I'm very much hoping that people work on some of their spy stuff after this. Espionage and spy agencies, cyber warfare sections, etc. Will be interesting to see. But if nobody's got any questions or anything, then I guess that will be that tonight. So I shall catch you all next week with another exciting discussion. Thank you all for coming.